Hi, welcome to part 4 of the Adventure Visual Novel tutorial. By popular demand, in this video you'll learn how to add player choices to your game in Godot. You'll notice that for this part I went back to the editing style of part 1. It's gonna be a live tutorial that you're meant to follow along. This is why the video is this long, even though I tried my best to keep it short. If you find that you vastly prefer the editing style of part 2 and 3 though, I'm willing to go back, even though it takes more time for me to edit. Just let me know in the comments. If you want to jump to the tutorial part directly, you can skip to this timestamp. However, I highly suggest you don't do that and listen to what I have to say next, because I think it's an important context to understand why player choices will be implemented a certain way. Okay, so before we start, let me address something that people have been asking in the previous videos. Why not using Dialogic? In case you don't know about it, Dialogic is a plugin for the Godot game engine that allows you to create visual novels and dialogue-based games without having to write a lot of code. It supports conversations with different paths and allows you to create a basic visual novel UI quite easily. If your goal is to make a traditional visual novel with a simple dialogue tree and few gameplay elements, I think Dialogic is a great choice. And in that case, I do recommend you check out a Dialogic tutorial first, because that might be enough for your needs. I have chosen not to use Dialogic because the inspiration for this tutorial series is Ace Attorney, which is an interactive visual novel. This is also why I chose to name this tutorial series Adventure Visual Novel. The interactive gameplay elements could be anything, but in case of Ace Attorney, there is an evidence presentation mechanic, there is a cross-examination mechanic, and the dialogue tree is far from linear because you can choose who to talk to in any given order. When your game involves several mechanics that needs to be interconnected like that, I would generally advise against using a third-party add-on, because you might find yourself unable to control the dialogue tree as much as you would want. The point of these add-ons is to leave it up to them to control your dialogue flow, and if there's a feature that's lacking for you in order to implement some sort of mechanic, you'll have to modify their source code yourself, which is very difficult and kind of defeats the purpose of using these add-ons in the first place. In short, if you follow this series, not only can you make a traditional visual novel, you can also expand on it and add any gameplay element of your choice, because you have implemented your own dialogue system and you have full control on it. You can change the text speed, the branching system, you can intertwine any gameplay element with your dialogue, you're free to do what you want. That's roughly the reason why I'm not using Dialogic. But to be honest with you guys, I'm also doing it this way because I found it more fun to implement everything myself. I'm willingly choosing an artisanal way of doing things here because I would prefer teaching Godot and JavaScript and not necessarily how to use a certain add-on. Using tools and add-ons because you have zero interest in creating those systems yourself is completely fine, as long as you're okay with the lack of flexibility that comes along with it. Now that this is cleared up, there's one more thing I need to address before we proceed with the tutorial. Godot has been updated to version 4.4. Normally I wouldn't really bring this up, but this update happens to be a pretty major one. You can read about it here if you want to know more details about it. When making tutorials, it's generally recommended to use the latest version of Godot so that it stays relevant for as long as possible, which is why I'm switching to Godot 4.4 starting now. I recommend you to use the same version if you want to make sure that everything works the same, but if you'd rather stick to Godot 4.3 or even older, that's okay. Just comment down below if you face any issue and, I'm sure we'll be able to work things out. When you download Godot 4.4 and open your project with it, you should be faced with the following window. If you restart your project, everything should work fine. There was no breaking changes on my side, so if you followed the whole tutorial so far, you shouldn't have any problem either. Likewise, though, if you do have a problem, leave a comment down below. That's it, guys. Sorry for the long introduction. Let's jump to the tutorial. Alright guys, back into our tutorial. If you followed everything so far, you should have main scene, you should have a dialogue UI, you should have character sprite, character, text bleep sound. We're going to be mainly dealing with the main scene and the dialogue UI today. So this is about our player choice, so obviously we're going to change a little bit how the dialogue is. And the first thing first, we're going to move this dialogue somewhere else, because this is fine for prototyping, but it's never really a good thing to have your script directly into your code. It's actually horrendous practice. You can't just leave it here. So we're going to move it somewhere else, and a good thing to do is to separate your creative content, like the dialogue, from your source code, so that you can change it without affecting the code. And additionally, if you're working in a team, you can have non-programmers change your dialogue script easily without having to deal with any file that contain JavaScript. So, what kind of file are we going to move this in, you're asking? It could be a simple text file, but if you do a text file, you're going to struggle a little bit with the branching system that is required with player choices, because player choices involve moving at different spots in the dialogue depending on the choice, right? So we're not going to do a text file, we're going to do a JSON file. So we're just going to place it in resources. I'm going to create a new folder here called story. Inside of that story folder, you're going to do create new text file. Inside of this window, you should be able to choose JSON, right? We're going to call this, you can call this how you want, but I'm just going to call it story.json. Once this is done, you're going to open your file. And lucky for us, the dialogue is pretty much already in JSON format. So copy this. Actually, scratch that. Just cut this and then put it inside of here. So save this. Now you're going to go back into your main scene, and we're just going to put an empty array for now. Okay, so now we have an empty dialogue. So if we execute our game, nothing is going to happen because there's nothing to say. Actually, there's even an error because I suppose it cannot be empty. We have to load our dialogue now that it's placed somewhere else in our code, and we are going to do this inside of the ready function. Just before anything else can happen, we're going to load the dialogue to go back at how the game was working previously. So dialogue lines. I guess we need some sort of like side function to load the JSON file first. So I'm going to comment this for now. We're going to put this at the bottom. Let's go here maybe. We're going to write a little utility function to load our JSON file, okay? So we're just going to call this load dialog. It's going to take a file path as an input, which is the location of your story script. Now, so very simply, you want to open the file, you want to read it, and you want to put it inside of your dialog variable, right? So in order, we're going to open the file. To do this, you need to use the file access class, which has an open function. And this is exactly where you're going to put your file location. And what you want to do, you can actually see the things you can do with the file access. You have, it's a little bit down there. There you go. You have read, write, and you have all the stuff at the bottom. What we want to do here is simply read. We don't want to modify the script here. We just want to load it, right? So we're going to read it. Then we're going to read the content of this file as text. Lucky for us, there is a function that does this in Godot, which is get as text. Here we go. Now, if you don't know where I'm finding this, you can just go into the documentation of file access, and you will see, if you scroll at the top, you will see the kind of functions that it has as like utility functions, and you can find the one that seems to be useful in your case, right? So we're going to read this as text, and then we know it's a JSON format, so we need to parse the JSON and transform it back into a normal array. So to parse the JSON, we're going to use obviously the JSON class with the parse string utility function, and you're just going to put your content here. Now that you've done that, you have parsed your JSON. You just have to return the content of it, which should already be an array, right? Return the dialog. Now that we have a utility function up on top in ready, we just have to load the dialog with the location of our story, right? So depending on where you've placed your own story, it might be different, but in my case, as you've seen, I've placed it in the resource folder, resources, and then the story folder, and it's a file called story.json. So this line stays red. You can see at the bottom here why. It says you cannot assign a new value to a constant. That's because this is a constant. When we were prototyping, I was just putting the dialog directly inside of this, and it had no reason to change. But in this case, it will change. We're just going to put a variable instead. Now, in order to see if this works, we can just execute our game, see if it crashes. It does. You can see trying to assign an array of type array to a variable of type array string. So the problem here is that dialog lines is typed as an array of string. But that information is not known when you return this. When you parse your JSON, the only thing it will know is that it's an array. It doesn't go as far as analyzing what's inside of it. So what we can do to make our lives easier is just to erase this, just do an array. You could also try and typecast your content here into an array of string, but I prefer just putting this as an array because I might change the format of my dialog. So now that we've done this, we're going to try again, see if it works. It does. Very good. The next thing you want to do is actually go back here, and we're going to improve this function a little bit. So as you saw, it works fine. However, this is prone to a lot of problems along the way. You can have a problem almost in every file. So I'm just going to try and make this method a bit more resistant and return some errors in case something is wrong, right? So the first thing you want to do typically before you access a file is to check if the file exists. And to do that, you can do if the file doesn't exist, which is also with file access, and it has a function called file exist. So just put your file path here. If that doesn't exist, you can print an error message that says the file does not exist. And then just for clarity, you can put the file path, after which you return nothing. Then we open the file. When we open the file, something can go wrong. We can fail in opening it, right? So at that stage, you can do if the file is nothing, we're going to print another error message. Failed to open the file. And again, we put the file path for clarity. And we return nothing. After this, we read the content as text, so this should go fine. We're going to parse the JSON. This can also fail. Parsing JSON only works if your file is a valid JSON format. So this is typically where you want to do some sort of like a security check. So check if the parsing was successful, which is simply done by checking if you have something inside of your JSON content here. And our error message is going to be something like failed to parse JSON from file. And again, the file path. So this might seem very unnecessary for now, but when you start adding a lot of different story files and you're not sure which one you've loaded, which one you're supposed to deal with, this function will be, like all of those utility checks will be much more useful in case you fail in loading your dialog. So this should be enough. We're gonna run the game, see if it still works. It's all good. All right. So now that our story is in JSON format, we can actually make it easier for ourselves and directly separate the speaker from the actual line of dialogue in the story script, right? We can do, for each line of dialogue, we can do speaker first, and then we can do text, for example, right? So in speaker, you're going to put the speaker name, so Phoenix in this case, and in text, you're going to put the actual text, so this one, right? And then you can do this for every line of dialogue, and this will allow us to easily extract the speaker name and the text without having to do something weird like this, you know, splitting the line after this character, because you might want to use this character for your own script, right? So to make sure you're able to do this, we can just take advantage of our JSON script and do something like this, right? So I'm actually going to change my dialogue and do something a bit more telling, because we're going to need to do some choices very soon. All right. So this is our new dialogue. Now, if you try to execute your game now, it's not going to work because our code doesn't know how to read this kind of things yet. So we have to change the way we parse our lines. So as I've said, this is not necessary anymore because it's already split. You're just going to erase the parse line function. erase it here as well. Line here is already going to be separated by speaker and by text. So we can just use line as it is. No need to use line information. And if you remember, we called it speaker and text. If you replace this, if I'm not mistaken, the game should work fine. There we go. We have a new dialogue. I'm just checking that everyone is speaking when they should. There we go. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is add the choices, right? Currently, we can't really add choices because we need to know where in the script we should go when we make a choice. And currently, we don't have a way to teleport somewhere else inside of our script. We need some sort of way for us to jump to another spot in the script when we want to. And in order to do this, we're going to use two different sort of information. We're going to add something called an anchor to have some sort of like way to know where we are in the script. So I'm going to do this now, actually. I'm going to add an anchor here. So just call it anchor. I'm going to do post choice. So typically here you want to give a name that reflects where in your script you are located. So this is supposedly after I've made my choice. So now that I have an anchor, I want a way to go into that location of my script with another command. And that command can be something called goto. I'm going to place it here. Goto. And here you want to say where in the script you want to go. So if I say post choice, it means I want to go there now. So if you follow the logic, we're going to read this line of text, then we're going to read this one, and then the script is going to see that we want to go to post choice, so it should skip this line of code, and it should go there directly, and then read the following two lines of code, the following two lines of your script, sorry. So we are going to implement this behavior now by having a different behavior for the process current line in case we have an anchor or a goto instruction. So before we attempt at reading the line of dialogue, we're going to check if this is a goto command. So first thing first, actually I'm going to take this back. I still need my line. Put this here. So first I'm going to check if this is a goto command. Check if this is a goto command. So if the line has goto inside of it as an instruction, what we want to do here is to move to the location of our dialogue where we have the anchor of the same name. So in order to move somewhere else, we need to change the value of our dialogue index, right? So here we need to find where in the dialogue we have the anchor called line goto, right? Like this is the anchor name, and we need to find where in the script this is. So we don't have a way to do this now. So for now, just put 0. We're gonna come back to it. Supposedly after this, dialog text has a different value, so you have to process the current line again, and then you can just return. So in order to find the correct dialog index, we're gonna create another function called, how can we call this? We can call this get anchor position. For input, you need the name of your anchor. And very easily, in order to find the anchor entry with matching name, we're going to go through every line until we find the line that has the anchor of the same name. So there are better ways to do this, but we're just going to do it the simplest way for now. So in order to read every line of our script, we're going to do a for loop. And we need to go from 0 until the size of dialog lines. So if dialog lines I has, first of all, does it has something called anchor? Because if it doesn't, we don't have to, we can just go to the next line. And also if the dialog lines I anchor is anchor, in this case, we can return the index because we are now situated exactly where the anchor is. And we are not supposed to reach this point of the function because you're supposed to have the anchor somewhere in your script. If you go through the entire script and you didn't find your anchor, we have a problem. So if we get here, the anchor wasn't found. So this is a problem in your script, and we're gonna display a message that says so. Error, could not find anchor, and then we're gonna put the name of our anchor. There we go. And we're going to return nothing. All right. So now we have a way to get the position of the anchor, and you're going to use it here. Get anchor position. And we're going to put the name of our anchor, which is line goto. All right. Now, another thing we need to do is to deal with the anchors. If we have an anchor, what do we want to do? We just want to go to the next line of our script because there's nothing to process. Check if this is just an anchor declaration, which is not a displayable content. There's nothing to show in our game if we have reached the anchor. We just want to proceed with the next line of the script. So if it has anchor, only thing you want to do is proceed. So to proceed, we just have to go to the next line of dialog. So we add one to dialog index, and then we call process current line again, and then we return. So if you reach an anchor, dialog index is going to get +1, and then we're going to call process current line, which is the same function. In the next call, supposedly it will reach this location of your function and process the dialog. Okay, so we're going to test if our implementation works by executing our game. Let's create. Oh, actually, I made a small mistake. I'm gonna fix it now. There we go. Execute the game. Let's create a dialog with player choices. That's a great idea. Give a choice to Apollo. Did anything happen? So as you saw, we have skipped this line in our script, which means that this works. We have successfully moved to our anchor position. So that's great. Okay, so now finally we can add our choices because we have the possibility to move to different locations in our script depending on the player choice. Okay, so I'm going to erase this. I'm going to add my choices here in the script with a new command called choices. So for this, you want to have a list of different choices, right? So to have a list, we're going to use this. Inside of this, you will specify the different choices. And to do this, you could put speaker and then Apollo. But if you think about it, this is a player choice. So this information is already known at this point. You don't really need to do that. You can just specify the text. So we're going to have a first choice. And we're going to add a second choice. There we go. So now we have different choices, and we need to change our code so that we can process these choices. Now that we have our choices, we need to specify where in the script we want to move for each choice. So I'm actually going to change the script a little bit to reflect the different choices that we can make. So I'm going to have one anchor called first choice. And somewhere else I'm going to have a different anchor called second choice with some content here. I'm going to erase that. So after first choice, this is where you're going to write the script that you're supposed to see if you chose the first choice. And for the second choice, we're going to have a different dialog. Now, you don't want to leave it like this, because if you leave it like this, after you process this line of dialogue, you're going to reach this anchor, and then you're going to process what happens in case of the second choice, which is not the behavior you want. After you've processed the part of your dialogue that is only supposed to happen after the first choice, you want to go somewhere else in your script. After this, you want to go to another anchor. We're going to call it end. Just so that we don't process this. And we're going to do the same, actually, after the second choice. We're going to go to end. So just to converge into the same position of your story after you've had the exclusive dialogue associated with your choices. So we're going to add our anchor called end, which is when the story is now, which is where the story is now back at being the same for every player. And we're going to add a line of dialogue. All right. We're going to leave it at this. Save. Skip a line here. And I'm going to skip a line here as well. So this should be fine. All right, so what we need to do now is specify where to go after we choose a certain choice. So we're going to have a goto command inside of the choice that specifies the anchor where we want to go to. So we're going to have first choice for the first choice, obviously, and second choice for the second choice. There we go. That's it. Now we have our dialogue with a branching system. Now inside of our code, we need an added section here to process the choices, right? So if line has choices, for now we're just going to do nothing. We're going to leave it for later. And then if it doesn't have choices, then it means it's the only remaining, the only other things you can have here is a line of dialogue. So you're going to process it normally. And okay, we're going to leave it at this for now, and we're going to add the choices into our UI first, and then we're going to come back to the code and add what we need to add for this to work properly. So before we do that, let's just try and see if our game still works. Make a choice. So nothing happened. We just went into the first choice section here because this line was just ignored, which is the behavior that we were expecting. So this is all good. So click on 2D. We're going to add the UI that we need for our choices to be displayed. We're not going to add it directly into the main scene. We're going to add it into our dialogue UI because this is part of the dialogue UI if you think about it. All right. So what's a choice? A choice is a button, and we are going to display them at the center of our screen. So inside the dialogue UI, we're going to add a center container because this is how you can place something at the center of your screen as easily as possible. And inside of our center container, we want to have a list of different choices placed on top of one another, right? So to place elements vertically, we can use a VBox container. Inside of our VBox container, we can have the choices, and the choices is a button, like I've said. All right, so first thing first, we want the center container to take the whole space of our screen. And to do this, you're going to go up there and you're going to click on that. Now that we've done this, as you can see, the button is at the very center of our screen, like we want. I'm going to add a text to my choice just for the sake of debugging. This is the first choice. There we go. Save. Now we need to change the display a little bit because this is not very pretty to look at. We're going to change the appearance of that. If you remember how we changed the appearance of our UI in the first video, we used the theme in order to do that. So inside of your dialogue UI, if you haven't done that, specify the theme inside of this so that everything below it will use the same theme. This is why this section here, your dialogue, which is here, the dialog box, this is why it appears the way it does. It's because in your theme, you have created something for panel container to be displayed the way it is. Okay, and we have done that for the rich text label as well. which is the dialog line, which has a specific kind of font that we have specified here for the normal font. Let me make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing for a button so that we have a display that's a little bit better for us. So click on the plus, search for button. It's right here actually. And now when you change the parameters here, you're gonna see that your button's appearance is going to change accordingly. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is to change the normal aspect of the button. Click on the plus and create a new style box flat. If you click on it, you'll be able to change the appearance of it. And you can already see here in the preview that the appearance of our normal button is different. I'm going to add a different color for this, and you can just use the same as me or add your own. So this is this color with some transparency to it. It's a little bit yellowish. Now, if you look at your display, it's very difficult to see the text inside of the button. So we're going to go to the colors for the font, and we're going to change the font color here to be black instead. Okay, and you can see in the preview that everything is reflected accordingly. Now, this is not the only thing we're going to change. We're actually going to change the color for most of these and put them black. So you can just do the same thing here. So for focus, we're going to go black. We're going to do the same for hover and for pressed color as well. For the outline color, we're not going to use this, so you can just leave it at the default color. And pressed color, we are also going to use black. Okay. Now go back into this section, and we're going to override more appearances of the button. So if you play a little bit with what's going on here, you can see that when you click, it goes back to being dark, which we are going to change as well. So for disabled, we're going to create a style box flat. We are going to override focus and hover, and we're also going to override press. All right. Now, same procedure. Simply add a style box flat to all of them. Okay, we're going to start with the hover. So click here to change the color. I'm going to use this color. Feel free to use the same. If you're wondering, this is the same color as the normal button, just without the transparency. I'm going to add the same for focus. And for pressed, I'm going to do the same as well. Now, we can hover here in our button to see that the color changes indeed. When we click, the text appears white, which is not really the behavior that we want. And that is because my font press color went back to black for some reason. Okay, there we go. Now, before we continue, I'm actually going to change the focus to make it a little bit different from the hover, because you want to know which button is in focus. So you can play your game with the up and down arrow if you want to. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a border here. So I'm gonna add like a 5 pixel on each side, and I'm gonna make this border yellowish, a bit like this. All right. Now that we've done this, if you click here, you will see that when it is in focus, you will have the border added to it. Now, the text is a little bit small, so we are also going to override the font size and make it a bit bigger, something like 35. We're also going to override the font and use the same font that we used for our dialogue. All right, this is the first choice. All right, then. I'm actually going to go and make our button a little bit bigger. So you're going to click on button, then you're going to come up to the layout, and I'm going to change the custom minimum size of it. I'm going to put 700 for the width and 50 for the height. All right, so this completes the appearance of our button. Now, before we try this, I'm going to add another button to simulate the choices. So you can just simply duplicate this one and change the text here to second choice. They're a little bit too close for my taste, so I'm going to make the gap between them a little bit bigger. So in your VBox container, we're going to change the separation constant value of the theme. So you can change it here by checking this and and making this value bigger. You can also make use of the theme that we have in the dialog UI and create something for VBox container here. And then you only have to change this value here. So I'm not going to do this because we don't need to. I'm simply going to override the value inside of this one specific VBox container. So I'm going to put something like 40. I will do the job. I'm going to move this center container on top here. You can imagine this is acting as some sort of like overlay on top of the rest of your dialog UI. I'm going to rename my center container to choices container and the VBox container to choice list. And I'm going to execute this one specific scene to see if it works accordingly. So if I click on one button, I have my border indicating that this one button is in focus. It should also work with the up and down arrow. You can focus on different ones by moving around. And yeah, it seems to be working exactly as we intended. So that's good. Now, if you want to, you can try adding more buttons to see how the display changes. It should stay at the center of the screen. And I think it works for up to 4 choices. And if you add a 5th one, you can see that it kind of goes behind the panel container. So if you are likely to have more than 4 choices in your visual novel, you might want to change the display a little bit, have smaller buttons, for example, or make a smaller gap between them. But it's not going to be the case for me. So I'm going to leave this as it is. I'm going to delete all of them actually, and only keep the first button that I've created. There. Now, obviously, we don't want this button to be displayed at all times. We want this choice container to be invisible up until we need to display our choices when it comes up in the story, right? So in our story here, when we have choices, we want to create one button for each of the available choices. So in order to do this, we need to know what button to instantiate inside of the choice list. And we can't really do this currently as long as the button is inside of this scene. We want to have a specific button that we can reference when we want to create a choice. So you're going to right click on button and you're going to click on save branch as scene. So I'm going to put this in my scenes folder and I'm going to call this player choice. There we go. After doing this, you will have this small icon next to your button indicating that this is in fact an independent scene. And if you click on it, it will take you to your button scene. So it has a different appearance because the theme isn't applied inside of this scene. So you can just apply it with quick load, selecting your theme, and there we go. Save. Now we're going to go back to our dialog UI. I'm going to save this as well. And like I said, we don't want this one specific button to be displayed inside of our game, right? Here you can see that if you execute your game, not only do you have the button displayed, but also if you click on it, the dialog will progress to the next line instead of waiting for you to make your selection. So this is 2 problems that we are going to fix. So first of all, inside of your dialog UI, you're going to hide this. You could also delete it actually, because we will never need this one specific button, but I'm going to leave it here in case I need to do some debugging later on. So just hide this. And now we're going to come back to our code and make the changes that we need in order for the display to change when we have choices. So inside dialogui.gd, we need a way to reference the choice list. So I'm going to add it here. I'm going to do onReady var choice list. And then before I can reference it, I need to make a unique name out of it. So right click on your choice list, click access as unique name, and then you can just drag and drop it here. Now we are going to create a function to actually change the display of the choice list whenever we need to. So I'm going to add a new function here called display choices. We need the choices as an input, a list of choices. And inside of this function, we want to create a new button for each of the choice that we have in our dialog, right? So create a new button for each choice. I'm going to have a for loop for choice in choices. What we want to do here is to load the scene that contains the button, right? So you could do load, and then you can go and fetch your scene, which should be inside of the scenes folder, and then play a choice. You can do this, but if you do this, you're going to load your scene for each choice that you want to create. And if you think about it, it's not really a good way to proceed, because you only really need to load this scene once and then instantiate different versions of it. So what we're going to do first is go on top of our file, and we are going to preload our scene once and for all. So preload the player choice scene. I'm going to call it choice button scene. And I'm going to use the preload function, which we've used in a previous video. And here you're going to go and look for your button scene, player choice. Now we can come back here, and we can use that preloaded scene and simply instantiate it. So this is better than loading it for each choice that we have in our dialogue, obviously. Now after this, we need to change the text of our button to reflect what is actually inside of our script. So you're going to do choice text, because if you remember in your story, you have something called text inside. After this, we are going to add it to our choice list. Add the button to the choices container. Choice list, you're going to do add child, and put your choice button here. Now, after you've done this, you want to make sure that your choices container is actually displayed. So I'm going to write show the choice list. And there is a function for this called show, okay? Because like I said, this is supposed to stay hidden as long as we don't have a choice in the story. And in order to do this, you're going to come up to ready here, actually, and you're going to make sure that at first it is not visible. Choice list, hide. There we go. Okay, so now we have a utility function to display our choices, and we need to use it inside of the main scene. So come back to the main scene, and when the line has choices, we're gonna display them with our new function. Dialog UI display choices. And then here, very simply, you're going to just pass in your list of choices. All right, so let's go ahead and make sure that this works. All right, so we have our two buttons displayed. Now, obviously, if you click on the buttons, nothing happens yet, because we didn't code this behavior, but we're going to do this now. Now, before we do this, there is actually something that we forgot to do inside of display choices. If you look at this function, the only thing we did is add choices to the display, but we didn't erase previous choices from it. And you can see that this will be a problem in case you have different choices later in the story. So I can just show you very quickly. Don't do the same thing here. It's just to show you the issue that we're going to have. So we have the two buttons. This is the first choice. And then it's going to add buttons again because we didn't erase the previous ones. So obviously you don't want this to happen. And in order to make sure this doesn't happen, we're going to clear any existing choices first. And you can do this by doing for child in choice list, get children, child dot queue_free. This is how you can delete the previous choices from your scene. This is also going to erase this one button that you have in your editor, by the way. That's why it's completely fine to have it here for debugging purposes. It's going to be deleted anyway when you reach your first branching in the story. So when we click on a button, we want the game to understand that information and proceed with the dialogue accordingly. If we click on the first choice, we're supposed to see this, and then the end. And when we click on the second choice, we're supposed to see this, and then the end. So in this situation, button, which is inside Dialog UI, needs to communicate something to the main scene. So we need to communicate something to the parent. And if you remember the previous videos, in this situation, we need to use signals. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to add a new signal called choice selected. We want this signal to be emitted when we click on a button. Now, thankfully, if you click on button and then on note here, you can see that there's already a signal that means that we've pressed or selected that button. So we just need to connect this signal to a function that will then emit our new choice selected signal. So inside of here, we're gonna attach signal to button, and you're gonna go ahead, look for the pressed signal. You're gonna connect it to a new function called on choice button pressed. Now we're going to go ahead and create this function. So come here at the bottom. Function on choice button pressed. And this is when we want to emit choice selected. And also hide our list of choice, because we have made our selection, so it doesn't need to be displayed anymore. So now back on the main scene, you want to go up to the ready, and you see where we have connected the text animation done signal of Dialog UI. We're going to do the same with our new signal, choice selected. We're going to connect this to a new function called on choice selected. So this doesn't exist, but we are going to create it now. Function on choice selected. So when we click on a button, we want to move to the required anchor of the story that corresponds to the go-to instruction of the choice, right? So we need to change the value of dialog index to reflect this. And we have a function for this called get anchor position. Now the problem here is that we don't know the name of the anchor yet, because we didn't pass on this information to this function. But that's no big deal, we're just going to fix it now. Anchor, which is a string. Now for this to actually functions, you want the anchor to be sent from the original signal. So you're going to come back to Dialog UI, and here in on choice button pressed, we're gonna attach an input to this signal. And this input will be the name of our anchor, which should be available inside choice goto. So when we do this, we should have the anchor name available inside on choice button pressed. And you just have to send the information up to the main scene. So now the information should be available inside on choice selected. The only remaining thing we have to do is to proceed with the dialogue and process the current line. So if you execute your game now, you're going to notice one problem, which is even before selecting a choice here, if you click anywhere else on your screen, here for example, you can see that the dialogue continues to be processed. And that's because in the input function here, we are still listening to the event next line when we have choices displayed on the screen. And we don't really want this to happen. When we have choices displayed on the screen, we don't want the dialogue to continue until the player has selected one of the choices, right? So we're going to do this now. Here we are going to take the information from the line, which is available in dialog line, dialog index, as usual. We want to check if this line has choices. And I'm going to create a boolean called has choices, which only check if this has the instruction choices. There we go. And when it does have choices, we want to stop for a moment and not proceed with the next line. And you can do this by adding and not has choices. When you do this, if you click anywhere else here, or press space or enter, the dialogue should not proceed. And if we click on the choice, It appears you have chosen the first choice. That's good. Let's try with the second choice. You went with the second choice. And I believe this is the end of our conversation, so it works accordingly. The only thing I'm going to add is a little sound when we have selected a choice. And just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to use the same sound that we have for the next sentence. So I'm just going to take next sentence sound and use the same thing here. And here you go. You have successfully implemented a branching system in your dialogue. All right, that's it for today. I do apologize for all the stuttering and the jump cuts. I didn't really write a script for this part. I was just trying to, wing it at one go. So again, if you preferred the editing style of part 2 and 3, let me know. I thought long and hard about how I should make this fourth part because I wasn't actually sure if I should use an existing scripting language or just implement my own. But I think using JSON to manage the dialogue tree turned out to be a pretty quick and easy solution. If you wish to use a different scripting language, by the way, you can. The overall concept is the same. And if you're worried about writing a dialogue inside of a JSON file because, let's face it, it's not really pretty to look at, you don't have to be. You can write your dialogue in any normal text editor. You'll just have to write a little script afterwards to transform it back into a JSON format. If you have any questions regarding this, you can leave a comment. I'm usually pretty quick to reply. Oh, and also please tell me what you'd like to be covered in the next part of this tutorial series. If you're enjoying this so far, I would love for you to give a thumbs up and also subscribe, but only if you want. And for those of you who want to help me commit more time to this project, there are ways to support me in the description of this video. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching.